Okie doke. So, Carl Killo here. So this series, so I've got three main streamlined. Well, streamline's not the right word, but maybe three paths that I'm planning on recording on. The Wake, Rattle, and Roll will be more of my explorations of, well, basically putting my journaling out onto live video so that other people can see it, and and some messages to myself to make sure that I'm getting up and running and off to a good start in the morning, and not just jumping in and hate posting, rage posting all for Facebook or something useless like that. Then there's the dark side, and that's quite literally usually towards the end of the day, where if I've got something that I need to get out of me, or if I want to poke at the things I was unhappy about, or maybe things that just need to be acknowledged so that I can move forward, then that will be me dumping out my soul onto the video screen. And then light and dark is going to be the synthesis of the two, having crafted myself by acknowledging the dark side as well as trying to keep firmly planted in the light side. I feel like I may be able to do some synthesis where I craft a little bit of order out of chaos. That's the idea, anyways. Okay, so this one. So I had a little fun this weekend and decided to do. Sorry for the bump. Decided to do a little bit of a controversial topic that I knew that would be probably ruffle a few militant atheist feathers. I used to be a very militant atheist, and now I've kind of toned it back. I'm not sure what I am anymore, but somewhere along the lines of just atheistic, just agnostic. But it really doesn't matter that much anymore. It's a much more open frame of mind, and because when you're a militant atheist, all you do is you spend time when you read the Bible as a militant atheist. All you do is go looking for evidence of the conclusion that you've already made, and the conclusion is that religion is poison, and so you end up with that filter on. You don't do a very good job of actually trying to understand what it's all about. And if you go online and read something like the Skeptic's Annotated Bible, then you can see things like, well, the author of that just goes out and highlights every atrocity, especially in the Old Testament, and points out misogyny and points out weird, bizarre things. And well, of course, it's weird and bizarre. I mean, the thing's been around for over 5,000 years, parts of it. So that's kind of missing the point, I think, when you do that, and going just looking for the mistakes was really limiting, I found. And now when I go back and I read the Skeptic's Annotated Bible, I'm like, man, this is just like barely even scratching the surface, and it's so tilted. How am I supposed to get anything out of that? So I'm finding it much more useful to drop that. Well, let me go find what's wrong filtered when I'm exploring that, and to have a more open mind to try and figure out. Well, this is the mission. The way I look at it, as I read, I'm trying to figure out what made these ideas really great for the people that were following them a long time ago, thousands of years ago. And I think that's key, because whenever you read history, and the Bible's a little bit like reading history, although a lot of the stories, of course, are quite fantastical and more oh, allegorical or mythology or myths that we can take as useful stories for ourselves. So, but they're historical in the sense that, hey, these are tenets and stories that were taught to people for thousands of years, and hopefully they were getting some utility out of it. So if I put myself in their shoes and try to figure out exactly what good they were getting out of it, then I'll understand my ancestry better, and I think that will open my mind and let me articulate my feelings and thoughts more readily. All right, so what did I argue about? Well, the premise that I argued was, just because an idea is tied to mysticism doesn't immediately invalidate that idea. If you have an idea that came from the Bible, for instance, it doesn't necessarily mean you can immediately dismiss it. You gotta, because there's still a lot of old baggage, I think, in the Bible. But even then, I think a lot of the things that I had considered to be old baggage were just more hidden meanings, and I had to go doing some more digging. Some of it's just plain weird. I mean, all the stoning and whatnot is just well, I haven't been able to crack that cookie yet. So that was the premise. Let me pull up my script here. Okay, so just because an idea is tied to mysticism doesn't invalidate that idea. So I'm going to pick a topic that's probably going to upset the militant atheists. I know it would have upset me a couple of years ago. Here's the idea. I'm the Lord thy God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. Thou shalt have no gods before me. Now, of course, the me of a couple of years ago would have gone, man, that's just a bunch of mystical crap. Now, the standard atheist argument, especially the militant atheist argument, is, first of all, what makes this God so special? You know, we've got Zeus and Odin and all that. And we've been people who've been worshiping just about everything under the sun, as well as the constructs of their mind and the sun itself. So what makes God so special? I mean, all these things, Zeus, Odin, Marduk, Mother Nature, pixies, sprites, fairies, goblins, and trolls, they all pretty much fall under the same category in my mind, fun things that humans made up. And so I could stop there and stop asking questions, or I could ask myself another question. Why did so many people believe in things that seem so foolish to us now? Well, one answer might be that they were just ignorant children and were doing the best that they could with the limited knowledge that they have to try to explain the world. And I think at least parts of that was true. I mean, I would probably drop the ignorant tag, but ignorant is not necessarily an insult. It just means you don't have complete information yet. So it's not a bad answer. You know, trying to explain the world, trying to figure things out. This is all before we had microscopes and the scientific method and the really great tools of empiricism that we have now that provide the structures that we live in and all the great things and this technology I'm using to talk to you now. Now that we might, so the one idea might be that now that we have that bit of truth, we don't need the old part anymore. So we can get rid of all the old bits and pieces because we've outgrown them. That's definitely what most militant atheists think, and that's what I had thought for a long time too. And it gave me a convenient excuse to not explore the Bible as deeply as I could have, and I was not doing anything other than cheating myself, in all honesty, because I'm quite able to separate the super mystical part and the blind faith part from the wonderful concepts that are in there that I think are why we're all here and why America and the West, the UK, Australia, are as fantastically wealthy as they are because of the core of discipline and hard work and respect for other people's discipline and hard work. But militant atheists think that, hey, if we just get rid of all the mystical parts, we're smart enough now that we can figure everything else out again. And I used to feel that way for sure. I'm not so sure anymore. I'm a little bit more humble before ideas that have been around for thousands of years than I was in the past. But the idea goes something like, oh, okay, so if we're moving forward, we're learning more about the world through science, and now we can cast off all this old dogma and superstition. Well, maybe, and I think a good part of it does need to be thrown out. I mean, there's really not a whole lot of room for, in my book, for instance, gays being seen as dirty or filthy or unclean, and there's definitely no reason to treat any individual without respect unless they are being disrespectful to you. So maybe we can throw away a few of those bad ideas and not keep the whole and keep the good stuff. Well, how do you differentiate the good from the bad is the real trick. Well, back to the atheist argument. In order to keep marching up the mountain, say, all we have to do is stomp out the last bits of mystical belief. No more Jesus, no more resurrection, no more Buddha being born out of the cut in his mother's side, and no Muhammad rising to the heavens on a winged horse. Just get rid of all the silly superstition, and something magical will happen. And I use the word magical on purpose because it's not quite obvious to me that you can just remove something and then good stuff comes in and fills its place. Sometimes the empty gap will be filled by something that's quite horrible. And one of the things that I'm most scared of is blind worship of the state, and looking for people who have power over us to take care of us for the whole rest of our lives. Because some people will just refuse to grow up and take responsibility for themselves. So I think that's a bit shaky. I don't think you can just crush mysticism or deep religious faith and then have good stuff happen. It's going to take some more work than that. All right, so that was one line of questioning. How about this one? Let's go down one other path. Our ancestors had to figure out the game of life the hard way. They didn't have the scientific method to help them out. What works and make it so that you don't die, and what makes it so that your children don't die, and what gives you the most freedom while still ensuring that the game of life gets perpetuated into the future. How can people be born into a world without writing? Because this is a long time ago, right? And we were sharing stories before we knew how to write stuff down. How can we be born into a world without writing and still gain knowledge from and have those people gain knowledge from their ancestors? Well, those are tough questions. Let's see what we can come up with. If we had a time machine and we took it back towards, let's say, just before the agricultural revolution, we could go see what those people were like and still have a pretty decent connection with them. They would think differently, somewhat differently from us, but they also would be very recognizable as Homo sapiens. So what would we see? Well, we'd see these people having a really hard life. But they had some tools to overcome the hard parts. For instance, pair bonding. Man and a woman coming together is not just something that's useful and convenient, but it's a valuable tool to increase your chance for survival because it's hard work raising kids. And you definitely want kids, because there's not that many people around, and if you can provide enough food for children, then they can help you out too, and that increases the chance of survival of the group and of the family. Unfortunately, that was tough on our ancient kids, of course, because they had to pretty much be born and get with it, otherwise everybody's going to be starving. So, and then having a community of people around you meant that you could actually have a better chance of surviving too. So small groups were obviously very useful. And if you got sick, then you wouldn't have to worry about not being able to get food during the time that you were sick. And someone would help you out, and you would help them out. And the teamwork of the group would also mean that you could take down larger prey and bigger, difficult animals that you track down over days. And that helped everybody survive and get meat and helped our brains grow. The success of the group meant that you survived. As long as the group was functional, it wasn't a big deal if one person got sick. It wasn't a whole tragedy. If you're alone and you get sick, times are hard. You protect the group and you protect your young. Unfortunately, you only live about 30 years or so usually, and then you probably die a really horrible death, usually from your teeth. Teeth were a real problem back then because we didn't know about keeping them clean. And so abscesses and things like that and deep infections could quite easily take you out of the game. And so, well, you've got these ideas for what might be useful to keep the game going and to make sure that you live and your children live and your family survives. But you can't write any of them down because writing hasn't been invented yet. But you do, and even if you could write it down, it really wouldn't matter because there wouldn't have been a whole lot of time for people to lay around and read a scroll or something like that. But you did have time to sit around the fire with your group because you had to cook every night. And so what did we do? Well, we got together and we sang and we danced and we bonded through all that, because the stronger bond that you had with your group, then when times got hard, you didn't quit the group and go try to find another one. You stuck it out with your group because you had a deep emotional attachment to that group. So that was a really useful thing, because that ensured the survival of the group, and ensuring the survival of the group meant that you survived at a much higher degree of likelihood. And it's interesting that I think this is an interesting connection between why we feel so good if we go to church and you start singing, or you go to some kind of well, anything where you're in a group and you are participating with that group all together. Some people feel really strong when they sing like their national anthem, and they feel a connection by doing that. So it doesn't have to necessarily be religious, although in the sense that that is a religious construct, whether it's connected to mysticism or not. What do I mean by that? Well, everybody's got a little bit of a religion in them. It's just that it's not all um, the monotheistic stuff that we think about. It's sort of your ideology that of how you look at the world, something like that. And it's a convenient filter for you to be able to process information, because the world's a busy place and your brain can only handle so many trains of thought and bits and pieces of information flying at you at once, and you can't do everything all the time. So it's good to have your religion, so to speak, as a um, filter to keep you from being overwhelmed, and to actually focus on something that you can make useful for yourself. So I think there's something really strong in our DNA that makes us feel really bonded to groups when we and singing brings that out. You sing in a group, and you get that kind of that feeling in your heart, and it's a connection with the people around you, and it's a really amazing thing. And and it makes sense, because that would increase the chance of survival of the group. If everybody felt good when they were singing together, they'd want to sing together, and then the more connected that they would be to the group, and the more connected that they were to the group, the more they would be willing to sacrifice for the group. And as long as the group lives, then the individuals within the group will live as well. So I think that is something that was actually a survival gene, something inside of us that makes us feel really good when we sing together in a group. So you have this picture of, singing around the fire, bonding with the group, and there were lessons and stories that were being told around the fire. And we wanted to remember the lessons because they were useful and they gave us reasons to keep going, even when we just watched something really horrible happen, like watching your dad die because he had a huge abscess infection in his jaw from a rotten tooth. And of course, there's nothing like antibiotics, like in our ancient history, and bacterial diseases would just take you out of the game in a really unpleasant way. So you need a little bit of faith when you see in something, at least in your group, when you see something like, uh, well, your mother dying trying to give birth to your sister, which happened a lot, that kind of thing. So we got all these stories, and singing stories made them easier to remember. Telling a lesson in story form helps the story keep going forward through time, because if it's just a random list of things to do and not to do to survive in the world, those can be easily forgotten. But if you put it into a story form, then that is very easy to remember. The trick is sometimes the story itself will bury the meaning of what you're supposed to actually get out of it. But so we learn these lessons from our elders, and even when disaster was striking and everyone was suffering and whatever might have been hitting the group at the time, maybe everybody got sick all at once, we still didn't want to give up. We always wanted to keep driving forward. And I'm thinking about, what that force is that makes us want to keep going forward. And well, again, I'm just going to go back to DNA because, well, what's DNA want to do? It just wants to make more copies of itself, and it doesn't really care about the suffering part because DNA has been built on replicating itself regardless of suffering for 3.5 billion years. And so it would make sense that you would always want to struggle in spite of suffering and pain. Because if you didn't want to struggle, if you just lay down on the floor, then you die and your gene set dies out, and then there's no more of that code of DNA. So only the DNA that makes you feel really like struggling and surviving is actually going to replicate and make a new human, and then they're going to have that same genetic trait of wanting to struggle and survive. So it just makes sense. So you want to stay alive, and you also have to deal with the fact that, well, even though you want to stay alive, someday you're going to have to die. Your body's not going to last forever. And that's a pretty bleak thought. And it leads a lot of people to down the road of nihilism because, well, God, I'm going to die sometime. What's the whole point? Especially if it's nothing but suffering between now and then. So what the hell do you do with that? Well, maybe you give some meaning to that inevitability. Won't you embrace the idea that you're going to die instead of trying to ignore it or use it as an excuse to do nothing? And then you can actually use it as a stick on your rear. Give you a little swat to keep going because you don't have forever to mess around. And you got a world to set up, or at least better conditions to help out for the people that will be still around when you die. And most people feel a very strong connection to those that they know, and they worry about, well, if they're going to die first, what's it going to be like for the people that get left behind? And they don't want them to suffer, and they want their life to be as easy as possible when they're gone. So that can actually be a really powerful tool because you keep marching forward in order to create a world that's better for your children. And you got to be able to do this because, well, you need it to be as easy as possible because when tragedy does hit, you're going to be mourned when you are gone, and that's going to make life really hard for your loved ones as they're crying and trying to get over the fact that they can't see you anymore. And you don't want it to be so hard that they roll down, flop on the floor and want to do nothing, and you become crushed by despair because there's a lot of hurt and pain wrapped up in all that. So you want to make up your story that's easy to remember and gives some meaning for a reason to struggle through the suffering. And the story makes it easy to remember. And the others around you are going to help you craft the story, so there's going to be some shared aspects based on your culture. And the story will attempt to explain what all the suffering's all about and why you should keep struggling when times get really hard. So you make up a story because they're easy to remember. And maybe it's just a story, but you know what? At least it's going to help others in the future to deal with the same pain that you have to deal with. And maybe your story makes life for them a little bit easier. That's the whole point. And then maybe they don't have to suffer as much as you. And then if we do that generation after generation, the world gets a little bit better, steadily over time. It also helps you accept your fate. Being able to accept your fate can really reduce the fear and anxiety that you have every day. And fear and anxiety are quite toxic because when you're anxious all the time, then your body's dumping cortisol, which is a hormone, into you all the time. And it's a hormone that puts you in a state of readiness that makes you go, oh, okay, I'm ready for anything because I got to watch out. I don't know what's going to go on next, and I got to be ready for anything. And anything is too much. And every time you have that anxiety fear reaction and the cortisol gets dumped into your body, then it's kind of like kicking yourself into high gear, and that is kind of well, your candle burns faster, let's put it that way. Your biological candle burns faster when you're constantly juiced on cortisol due to anxiety and fear. So if you can accept your fate and be okay with it, then you reduce anxiety. And that way, when you know your fate and the fate of your children and the fate of everybody that you love, it gives you reason to struggle up against chaos, and instead of just giving up in hopelessness. And so your story can give strength to you and to your group, and it gives meaning. So I think this is how religious stories were crafted in the past, and why. Something like this. This is more of a rough framework, and I'm just trying to get these ideas out of my mind and onto paper to see what I know. So the story helps make sure that those who are successful continue to struggle and produce. It's if you were only concerned about yourself, and then maybe you would just store up enough food through the winter for your family to survive. But if you have this story that says, hey, there's really a lot of value in overproducing so that you can share with others, now you've got reason to be the best that you can be and to produce as much as you can, and that reduces other people's suffering. So a really useful story would give you a reason to produce more than just for yourself, and to be altruistic rather than completely selfish, and to work as little as possible. So that gives you some morality from your story. It also helps you deal with your mortality, and it gives you some drive, since you're all going to die and everyone is going to die that you love, and your time is limited. You only have so much time to help your children and to do the best that you can in the world to make it easier for them while you're here. And then you can feel good about the work that you were doing, even though you know that the end is all the same for all of us. And then that story will help the next generation see the utility and goodness of hard work and making the world a little bit easier each generation. Each generation has the possibility of making life a little easier and a little easier. And anybody that wants to deny that, I've read a few books that are quite nihilistic in their judgment of how much suffering is going on in the world. I'm sorry, but if you're going to ask me whether I want to live in pre-agricultural era where there were fewer people, just because that was more egalitarian and there was little chance of a famine hitting, because you're not dependent upon the crop to come in to feed everybody each year. And now, well, I'll take now. So let's jump forward about 90,000 years. So we've got these traditions that have been carried through by a story and songs, and once we hit the era when we can actually start writing these things down, then we can have a more solid version of our stories, and we can put this all on record, and we can write, and we can compare our stories and see which ones are the most useful, and then the old ones can be discarded that don't transmit useful information as well. And so all this is about keeping the knowledge of our ancestors moving forward through time, because we don't have time for every single generation to figure out the whole game from scratch. So there's pretty useful information in all these old stories. So the stories protect not only the people that follow them, but also ensure that the game of life keeps going forward through time. And this helps us avoid the mistakes of the past. And allows us to learn from history rather than just blindly committing the same mistakes over and over again. And a lot of these ideas have been tested through different societies for thousands of years. And some of these ideas are so successful that they allowed for certain societies to flourish much more than other ones. And I think we're seeing that now, and that the West has the most productive civilizations in the world. And then so organized religion started to come up from these stories as we were writing them down and keeping the most useful ones. And the amazing thing is, even in spite of all the problems with organized religion, I think it did more good than bad on the balance. Because we would have revolted against it a long time. It's not like, I don't think it went like this. The Roman Empire collapsed, then was the Dark Ages, and Christianity held us back into the Dark Ages for a long time. I think it was quite the opposite. Because way back then, after the collapse of the Western Roman Empire, there was a lot of barbarism and no respect for life, and definitely no respect for property, and it was pretty much the will of the strong all over again. And it was when, I believe, not Charlemagne, but just before Charlemagne, finally some of these kings of the Dark Ages, I guess they don't like the term Dark Ages anymore, but whatever, I think we all understand what that is. These later kings of the Dark Ages started adopting Christianity, and that gave them a code to live by, where you don't just go running around pillaging and murdering everybody, and you respect people's property and rights. Now, that, of course, that doesn't mean that people were perfect back then, but it did give them something to fall back on. And if you don't have those things, and you can't build cities, and you can't have a foundation for people to discover the scientific method, because you've got too many people scattered all over the place, and you can't learn that way without being able to communicate. You can have a really smart Newton born somewhere, but if he's not able to get the materials that he needs to stand on the shoulders of the giants that came before him, then he's going to have to do all of his work from scratch, and he's not going to have anybody to share it with, and his ideas will be lost, and it'll just be like he was never born. So this is a fake Newton, not the real one I'm talking about. So say someone with the intelligence of Isaac Newton was born in 700 AD, we probably wouldn't have known about it. So these were useful ideas, and organized religion codified the stories and protected them, and institutions were built around this. And so you have things like, Catholicism, of course, and then leading up into the Enlightenment. But I'm not getting into that today. And so we can look around the world and see which countries are most prosperous and get some idea of which of the old stories are best to, not necessarily to adhere to with blind faith, but you better be really damn sure before you go poking at the tenets that have produced the most prosperity. And we see the most prosperity in places like the United States, the UK, Western European countries, and Australia, and even Japan to a certain extent, although Japanese culture was not based so much on Christianity until, of course, they lost World War II, and then they adopted a lot of the ideals of the West. But they're still very, well, let's not get distracted on that. So some shared mythos, some shared myths that really high productive countries have. Well, money stores value. If you and I want to make a trade, then we both agree that the money has some sort of value, and that value is generated from someone laboring at some point. Generally, there are other ways. So it's money's not just something that you buy things with. And if we didn't believe that, then it's really hard to have an active and productive trade economy. Some other examples: we believe it's not right to lie or to deceive other people. Countries that have corruption at their core, where it's common to go through and bribe people to get what you want, are not as productive as the ones where people will take a stand and say, no, I'm not going to take your bribe. I'm going to do this honestly, because if I take the bribe, that means we're shortcutting somebody and something is getting broken along the way. We respect other people's property. Speaking your mind means that you can avoid having to draw a sword. We value and protect life. You can earn a living by providing something of value to others. And the nuclear family is the core of the smallest possible unit which protects and raises children. And I think these are all common ideas of the very highly productive countries of the West. And so these are not common concepts, and we tend to take them for granted. We as humanity, had to nurture these concepts for thousands of years. And that's a lot of suffering. And a lot of people dying and being born as these, well, I think this is what we pretty much refer to as Judeo-Christian values, became so prevalent and so commonplace that we don't even think about them anymore. I mean, you go into a theater and you don't have to worry about someone clubbing you over the head and taking your wallet. So yeah, these concepts are not common through history at all. And we've managed to build large productive communities because of these ideas, Judeo-Christian values. Now, that doesn't mean you need to believe in a mystical God or the rebirth of Jesus to have these things at your core. You just take them for granted. You're not going to get run over outside and someone slam into you on purpose, and then they come and squat in your house. It just doesn't happen. So these ideas weren't always there, and we had to work really hard to get them over thousands of years. And then they were protected, and a lot of the really important ones were codified, shall we say, in things like the Ten Commandments. And that gave them some connection with something that was above and beyond humanity. And I think that wrapping those ideas in that layer of mysticism and that story of God being somewhat of the tyrannical bastard that's going to come get you if you don't orient yourself properly in the world, makes the ideas very easily remembered and gives them a certain weight. So it doesn't really matter whether you believe in the mystical version of God or not, but you can understand why these ideas have been around for such a long time, because they provide they're very useful ideas. And the evidence of that is all around you, especially if you live in a Western country. All right, so what's all this have to do with God and the first commandment? Well, if you want to protecting an idea in the lockbox of mysticism is what the first commandment is all about. Thou shalt have no gods before me. And this is not Magic Sky Daddy being jealous. This is the collective knowledge of thousands of years, protected and encapsulated in a nice shell. And the shell is called mysticism. Because if you put something as an untouchable value, then you don't have to worry about reinventing the wheel every few generations. And so you put God at the top, and God protects all the other commandments. And that's why God is referred to as jealous, because you can't put anything in his place If you do, if you try to put a leader there especially, bad juju happens. Like really bad stuff. And even if it doesn't happen on that leader's dime, then it's a very high possibility that that leader who's been seen as God will end up, or at least as powerful as God, will end up destroying the parts of the very beneficial parts of society, and eventually there's going to be hell to pay for that in the form of people starving, more than likely, or nasty, nasty wars. So God, the concept of God is protecting all these other rules down the rest of the Ten Commandments. And he's kind of like a placeholder. That's a really weak term. I'm trying to think of a better term than that. But the idea is that you can't put anything else in there. You have to have this all powerful, all jealous deity that says, don't do it or else. Don't replace me up here. There's literally going to be hell to pay if you try to poke around with this. So don't do it. So bad stuff happens when you put any ideal over the concept of God, especially when you put a human there. All the brutal leaders of the past have generally tried to occupy that top rank of this hierarchy of belief. And that's when you get cults of personality and people like Stalin and Hitler, who are worshipped as deities. And then, yeah, hell on earth. So the first commandment is a call to humility before things we cannot understand. Now, we like to pretend that we understand exactly how the world works, but it's a really damned complicated place. And every time we try to put in some sort of institution that is top down, like National Socialism or communism, hell on earth. You can't replace this concept of God with something else. Don't poke at it. You'll kill people. So we can get very cocky in thinking that we can engineer a better and perfect world. And I think that's why the idea of individuality is at a very core place in Christianity, and that's one reason I do like Judeo-Christian values, is because that it protects the individual. You know, a lot of people will look at things like, well, abuses like treating gays horribly as evidence that Christianity can be too tyrannical, and so, well, we should tear the whole damn thing down. And that's wrong. You need to protect the other values and still have other people realize that, look, this is all about individuality, not about atrocities happening because Christianity is bad. So this is Christians not following the word of God when they're treating other people poorly or horribly. And that's not the fault of the belief system. That's the fault of corrupt, broken human beings, and there's plenty of us, and it's hard enough to follow those tenets because we're weak, and we want to do what we want instead of what the, quote, right thing is. So if you humble yourself to the idea of the first commandment, whether you believe in a mystical God or not, you're going to keep that sacred in a way that means you don't mess with it. And then you don't put dictators over yourself. You don't put weird abstract concepts like communism above us, where you sacrifice the individual to the good of the collective, and that doesn't work out. I think we've tried that experiment enough. Stop killing people trying to be infinitely altruistic. It doesn't work that way. You build yourself up first. And if everybody builds themselves up as well as they can, then it's very easy to take care of those that are less fortunate. So there are many things that I think that we can work out for the better, but we have to be really, really damn sure before we try. Well, you don't ever want to mess with trying to put these ideas above God. Because it's not God that made the rules. We made the rules through thousands of years of suffering and death. And that's something that requires respect before we go tearing down the things that got us here. And I think that's worth examining with a little bit more care than just saying, well, that's mystical, therefore we can reject it. Thanks, guys. I'm going to cut it off here. We'll talk at you soon.